The virus came from nowhere. No one saw it coming. At first, there were rumors, whispers about something strange happening in other countries. But it didn't seem like a big deal. People continued with their daily lives, unaware of what was about to unfold. The world was too busy with its own problems to notice the small signs. But soon, it was impossible to ignore. It started with a few people getting sick. At first, it seemed like a regular virus: fever, chills, a cough. But then something unusual happened. Those who got sick didn't get better. Instead, their bodies began to change. Their skin turned a sickly shade. Their eyes turned red, and their muscles grew, bulging under their clothes. They weren't just sick anymore. They were something else. They were turning into monsters. The changes were terrifying. People's bodies were twisting in unnatural ways. Some grew claws, while others became taller and stronger. Their minds seemed to snap too. They were no longer the people they had been. They became violent, attacking anyone who came close. It didn't matter if you were a friend or a stranger. The infected tore through the streets, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Alex had been at home when it started. At first, it seemed like a regular news report. But then, the report turned into something worse. People on the streets were screaming, running from something they couldn't outrun. Alex had seen the pictures, people turning into monsters right before their eyes. It wasn't just a virus. It was something much worse. Something terrifying. The world quickly spiraled into chaos. Cities shut down. Governments couldn't control the spread of the virus. Fear took over. People stayed in their homes, locking their doors and hoping the madness would pass. But it didn't pass. It only got worse. The monsters multiplied. And soon, there weren't enough safe places left. The infected were everywhere, hunting anyone who wasn't changed. Alex knew they had to leave. The city wasn't safe anymore. Their family was gone, lost to the virus. All they had was the clothes on their back and a few supplies they'd managed to grab before things got too bad. They didn't know where to go, but staying in the city meant certain death. So, Alex ran. It was only a few days before the virus started to affect Alex in a strange way. At first, they thought it was exhaustion. Too many days of running, too little food. But then it became clear. Their skin started to tingle, as though something was crawling under it. Alex felt a sudden surge of energy, unlike anything they'd ever felt before. They stopped, touching their arms, trying to figure out what was happening. It was almost as if their body was changing, but not in the way the infected people had changed. They felt stronger, faster, more alert. At first, Alex was scared. They didn't know what was happening. Was this the virus too? Were they going to turn into a monster? But as the days passed, the changes seemed less frightening. Instead of feeling like they were losing control, they felt like they were gaining something. Something powerful. Their senses sharpened. They could hear things in the distance that they hadn't been able to before. Their vision became sharper, and they could see in the dark with ease. They could run for miles without tiring, and their strength was growing. It was like something inside them was awakening. But with this newfound power came a new fear. What if they were becoming like the monsters? What if this virus was changing them, just like it had changed everyone else? Alex had to know what was happening. They couldn't be the only one feeling this way. They needed to find other survivors, people who might have answers. As Alex traveled through the deserted streets, they found more and more signs of the destruction the virus had caused. Buildings were abandoned, windows shattered, cars overturned. It was like the world had been left to rot. The few people left were hiding, afraid to come out. But Alex didn't have the luxury of hiding. They had to keep moving, had to keep searching for answers. The first encounter with the infected came sooner than Alex expected. They had been walking down a quiet street, the silence almost unbearable, when they heard the noise. It was a low growl, followed by the sound of something heavy moving through the wreckage. Alex froze, listening. Then the creature appeared. It was a man, or at least it had once been. Now, it was a twisted version of a person, with claws for hands and glowing red eyes. It was fast, moving toward Alex with a horrifying speed. Alex didn't have time to think. Instinct kicked in. With a speed they didn't know they had, Alex ran. They were faster than they'd ever been. The infected man's growls faded behind them as Alex dashed into an alley. They could hear the creature crashing through the debris, but it was too far behind. Alex kept running, their heart racing, until they found a place to hide. Alex crouched behind a pile of debris, breathing heavily, listening for any signs of the creature. The virus might have turned people into monsters, but it was also giving Alex something else. Something strong, something that could help them survive. As the sun began to set, Alex knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. The world was changing. The monsters were everywhere, and they were getting stronger, but something inside Alex was different. The virus hadn't taken away their humanity. It had given them a new chance, a chance to fight back. The power that had awakened inside them was the key to surviving this new world. But Alex also knew that with power came responsibility. They couldn't let the virus control them. They couldn't let it turn them into something worse than the monsters they were fighting. They had to find a way to use this power to make sure it didn't consume them. The question now was not just about surviving the monsters. It was about surviving the virus itself. Would Alex be able to control the power that was slowly changing them? Or would they, too, become a monster in the end? As night fell, Alex made a decision. They couldn't do this alone. They needed answers. They needed other survivors. And most importantly, they needed to find out what the virus truly was. What was its purpose? Was there a way to stop it? Or was this the beginning of the end for humanity? With a new sense of determination, Alex stood up. They couldn't let fear control them anymore. The virus might have mutated the world, but they weren't going to let it mutate them. It was time to fight back. It was time to find out the truth. As Alex moved through the ruins of the city, they couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on their shoulders. The streets were eerily silent, as though the virus had stolen all the life from the once bustling city. Only the occasional crash of something breaking or the distant growl of the infected reminded them that they were not alone in this desolate place. With each step, Alex's body seemed to hum with energy. The power inside them was growing stronger, but it was also growing harder to control. Every time they moved, they could feel it. This strange, almost electric sensation running through their veins. It wasn't painful, but it was unsettling. The virus hadn't just given them physical strength. It had altered their very essence. They could hear things in the distance that they couldn't have possibly heard before. Whispers, footsteps, even the movement of air. It was as if they were becoming something more. But more of what? That was the question that gnawed at Alex's mind. They had seen the monsters, those horrifying creatures twisted by the virus. They had seen people lose everything, become savage and mindless. Was that their fate too? The thought terrified them. But deep down, Alex believed there was something different about their power. They weren't turning into a mindless monster. They could still think clearly, still feel the pull of their humanity. The sound of a door creaking open broke Alex's thoughts, and they froze, instinctively ducking behind an abandoned car. Their senses were sharp now. Every tiny movement, every sound felt amplified. A small group of people emerged from a nearby building. They looked ragged, exhausted, but there was something about them that made Alex feel a little safer. They weren't infected. At least not yet. Alex stepped cautiously toward them, making sure not to make a sound. The group seemed lost, confused, just like Alex had felt when they first started running. They looked like survivors, people who were still holding on to some thread of hope. Alex didn't want to draw attention to themselves, but they needed answers. The survivors might know something about what was happening. They had to find out what the virus really was. One of the survivors, a man with a weathered face and a rifle slung over his shoulder, noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Alex held their breath, waiting for him to turn. When he did, their eyes met for a brief moment. For a heartbeat, there was a pause, an unspoken understanding between them. The man didn't seem shocked, just wary. He had probably seen enough by now to know that things were no longer normal. The man motioned for the others to follow him, and Alex, feeling a mix of fear and hope, decided to approach. They didn't have much choice. They couldn't keep running forever, and these people might hold the answers to the questions that were eating at Alex's mind. They walked toward the survivors, keeping a safe distance. The man stopped and looked at Alex, his eyes scanning them. "You're not one of them," he said, his voice low but steady. Alex nodded, not sure how to respond. "I'm not infected," they said, their voice shaky. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what this virus is." The man's eyes softened, though his expression remained cautious. "It's a weapon," he said, his words heavy with the weight of truth. "It wasn't some random outbreak. It was made. And those of us who are left, we've got a decision to make. Fight or hide." Alex's heart skipped a beat. A weapon. The virus was created. It made sense in a way. How else could something so dangerous spread so quickly, change so many people so completely? The world wasn't prepared for something like this, and it was clear that no one knew how to stop it. The man motioned for Alex to follow. "We've got a place. It's not safe here," he said, and turned to lead them toward a nearby building. Alex hesitated for a moment, unsure whether they could trust these people, but there was no time to question it. They had to find answers, and these survivors might be the only chance they had. Inside the building, it was dark and cramped, the air thick with dust. The survivors had turned what was left of the space into a makeshift shelter. A fire burned in one corner, and a few of the people were sitting around it, talking in hushed tones. It didn't seem like much, but to Alex, it felt like the first real sense of safety they had found since the virus began to spread. "Sit," the man said, gesturing to a spot near the fire. "We can talk now. You look like you've been running for a while." Alex sat down, their legs sore from the constant movement. The fire's warmth was comforting, though it only made the strange tingling sensation in their body more noticeable. The power inside them pulsed again, but this time, Alex didn't feel afraid. They were starting to understand it, starting to realize that this was not something that would go away. It was part of them now. The man sat down across from them, his face grim. "We've been studying the virus for months. We know it's not natural. It was engineered. A lot of the people who got infected, well, they're beyond help. But some of us, like you, seem to have been changed in a different way." Alex looked at the man, their mind racing. "Changed? How?" The man hesitated, then spoke again. "You've got power, don't you? It's not just physical. You can feel it, can't you? It's like the virus has awoken something in you. Some of us have it, too." Alex nodded slowly. "Yes, I don't know what it is, but it's like I'm stronger, faster. My senses are sharper, but it's not normal. It feels wrong, like I could lose control." The man's face softened. "You're not the only one. Some of us have powers like that. But it's dangerous. The more we use them, the more we risk becoming like the infected." They lost their humanity. "Some of us are close to that point, too. The virus is changing us. But not all of us have turned into monsters, yet." Alex felt a chill run down their spine. What do we do? If we keep using these powers, what happens to us? The man looked away, his voice barely above a whisper. "We don't know. But we have to survive. We have to keep fighting. There's a lot we don't understand, but one thing is clear. We can't let this virus destroy us." Not completely. Alex felt a mix of fear and hope. They didn't know if they could trust these people, but they knew one thing. They couldn't do this alone. The virus had changed everything, but it didn't have to be the end. They could still fight back. They could still find a way to survive, but they would need to understand the virus, control the power it had awakened inside them, and keep the monsters at bay. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding a way to fight back. And to do that, Alex knew they would need to learn more. More about the virus, more about their power, and more about the people who might help them along the way. The fire flickered, casting shadows across the room as Alex sat back, their mind racing with the new knowledge they had gained. This was only the beginning. The world had been turned upside down, but it wasn't too late to fight for a new future. The question was, would they be able to control the power inside them, or would it consume them just like it had consumed the monsters outside? Only time would tell. The days passed in a blur. The world outside was a place of constant danger and uncertainty, but inside the small, makeshift shelter, Alex and the survivors tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Each night, they gathered around the fire, their faces grim as they spoke in hushed tones about their experiences with the virus. There was a shared understanding among them. The virus wasn't just a sickness. It was something far more complex, far more dangerous. One evening, as the group sat around the fire, the man who had first spoken to Alex, named Daniel, stood up. He was older than the rest of them, with a weathered face and a deep sadness in his eyes. His voice was steady, but there was a rawness to it that made Alex pause. "We need to find the source of the virus," Daniel said, his gaze serious. "If we're going to survive, if we're going to figure out what's happening to us, we need to understand how this all started." Alex nodded, feeling a chill run down their spine. They had already suspected it, but hearing it out loud made it feel more real. The virus wasn't just an outbreak. It was something planned, something engineered. But why? And by whom? These were the questions that haunted Alex's mind. "We don't know where it came from," Daniel continued, pacing back and forth. "But we found something. A lab, hidden in the city. It looks like it's been abandoned for a long time, but it's the only lead we have." Alex felt their heart race. A lab? Could it be the key to everything? Could it hold the answers they were all searching for? "We need to go there," Daniel said, stopping in front of Alex. "But it's dangerous. The city is crawling with infected, and we don't know what we'll find when we get there. But if we want to understand this virus, we have no choice." Alex didn't hesitate. They couldn't stay here forever. They had to know the truth. And more than that, they had to control the power inside them. The power that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The virus had changed them, but it didn't have to be their downfall. They could use it to fight back. "We'll go," Alex said, their voice firm. "We need to know what this virus really is." The group spent the next day preparing for the journey. They packed supplies, food, water, weapons, anything they could carry. The city was a dangerous place, and they had to be ready for anything. Alex felt a mix of fear and determination. They had never ventured this far into the city before, but they knew they couldn't back down now. The answers they needed were out there. As the sun began to set, the group set out, moving cautiously through the abandoned streets. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was oppressive. Every step felt heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The streets, once filled with life, were now empty. Buildings were destroyed, windows shattered, cars abandoned. It was as though the virus had erased everything, leaving nothing but a hollow shell of what had once been. But Alex could feel it. There was something alive here, something that had been awakened by the virus. It was in the air, in the ground beneath their feet. It was in the way the city felt so empty, as if it were waiting for something. Alex's senses were sharper than they'd ever been. They could feel every movement, hear every distant sound. It was as though the city itself was speaking to them, telling them where to go, what to do. As they approached the lab, Alex's heart began to race. The building loomed ahead, an imposing structure in the middle of the ruined city. It looked abandoned, but there was something about it that felt wrong. The windows were dark, and the front door was locked, but Alex knew they had to get inside. "Stay alert," Daniel whispered, his voice low. "We don't know who, or what, might be inside." The group moved cautiously toward the entrance. Alex felt the familiar surge of power inside them, their muscles tense, ready for anything. They reached the door, and Daniel kicked it open. The sound echoed through the empty building, sending a chill down Alex's spine. Inside, the lab was eerily quiet. The lights were out, and the air smelled stale, like it had been sealed off for years. The walls were lined with metal shelves, many of them empty or knocked over. Papers and files were scattered across the floor, some of them torn, some of them unreadable. It was clear that the lab had been abandoned in a hurry, but there were still signs of life. The equipment was old, but it looked like it had been used not too long ago. "This is it," Daniel muttered, looking around. "This is where it all started." They moved deeper into the lab, carefully stepping over broken glass and scattered papers. Alex's mind was racing. What had happened here? What was the virus? Was it really a weapon, as Daniel had said? And if so, who had made it? They found a small room at the back of the lab. Inside, there were computers, monitors, and a large metal door that looked like it led to another section of the facility. Alex's eyes scanned the monitors, searching for any clue that might explain what was happening. One of the computers was still on. The screen flickered to life as Daniel sat down and began typing. The others gathered around, waiting. The tension in the room was palpable. Alex's mind was a blur of questions, but one thing was clear. They were getting closer to the truth. They had to find out what had happened here, no matter what it took. After a few minutes, the computer beeped, and a file appeared on the screen. Daniel clicked on it, and the group leaned in, their eyes fixed on the words that appeared. It was a report. The virus, it turned out, was not a natural occurrence. It had been created in this very lab, developed by a group of scientists working for a powerful corporation. The goal had been to create a serum that would enhance human abilities, turning ordinary people into superhumans, soldiers capable of incredible feats. But something had gone wrong. The virus didn't just enhance people's abilities. It mutated them, twisted them into monsters. The scientists had lost control, and the virus spread. The report went on to describe the efforts to contain the virus, but the outbreak had spread faster than anyone had anticipated. The infected people had been turned into monstrous creatures, and the virus had spread to the general population. The corporation had been forced to abandon the lab, leaving everything behind. But there was something else in the report, a reference to a second phase of the project, a way to control the mutation, to enhance the abilities without losing humanity. The document ended abruptly, with no further information. The rest was locked behind a password-protected file. Alex stared at the screen, their heart pounding. The truth was more complicated than they had imagined. The virus wasn't just a mistake. It was part of a larger plan, and they had only scratched the surface. But the question remained, could they control the power inside them? Could they use it to fight back, or would it consume them like it had consumed the monsters outside? The answers were out there. But Alex knew one thing for sure. They couldn't stop now. They had to keep going. They had to find a way to stop the virus before it destroyed everything. And maybe, just maybe, they could turn the virus into the key to saving what was left of the world. But first, they had to survive. The lab's secrets weighed heavily on Alex's mind as they stepped out into the dim, forsaken streets once again. The report on the computer was a revelation, but it had only raised more questions. The truth was clear. The virus was no accident, but a product of human ambition, created in the pursuit of power. The corporation's goal had been to breed superhumans, soldiers who could withstand any war, but instead, they had unleashed a nightmare. Alex's grip on their weapon tightened as they walked, their mind racing. The monsters outside, those deformed creatures that once had been human, were not just random victims. They were the results of a twisted experiment, an experiment that had gone horribly wrong. But the second phase of the project, the one they'd barely uncovered on the computer, could be the key to turning the tide. If only they could access that locked file, maybe they would find the answers they needed. But for now, they had to survive, and the city outside the lab was far from safe. The group moved quickly and quietly, retracing their steps toward the shelter where they had taken refuge. As they passed through the wreckage of what was once a bustling neighborhood, the eerie silence of the abandoned city seemed to press down on them like a suffocating blanket. Alex could feel the power inside them again, a constant hum that thrummed beneath their skin. It was there, in every muscle, in every nerve, urging them forward. They had no idea how to control it fully, but it was becoming clear that they couldn't ignore it. The virus had awakened something in them, something more than just raw strength or heightened senses. It was as if their very body was beginning to adapt to this new, terrifying world. A low growl broke the silence, and Alex immediately froze, motioning for the others to stop. The sound came from behind them, a deep, guttural noise that sent a wave of fear through the group. Alex's heart raced as they turned to face the source. In the shadows, a group of infected was moving toward them, their bodies twisted and grotesque. They moved in jerky, disjointed motions, their eyes wide and empty, their mouths open in hungry snarls. The group backed up slowly, trying to make themselves less noticeable. But it was too late. The monsters had already spotted them, their twisted faces contorting in fury. Without warning, they charged, their steps heavy and unnerving as they tore through the rubble. Alex felt their instincts kick in, faster than they had ever felt before. They grabbed a piece of debris from the ground, a broken metal rod, and held it like a spear. Their bodies surged with newfound power as they moved toward the first infected, ready to defend the others. Before the infected could reach them, Alex lunged, their movements sharp and precise. They struck the first monster, piercing its side with the rod. The creature let out a horrible screech and collapsed to the ground, but others were already closing in. The group was surrounded. Daniel, his rifle in hand, fired several shots at the oncoming creatures, but they were relentless, pressing forward with terrifying speed. The air was thick with tension, with the sounds of gunfire and the frantic, primal snarls of the infected filling the streets. Alex's heart raced as they moved in, striking with precision. They felt the power coursing through them, driving them forward, making them faster, stronger. Each blow felt natural, like they were becoming something new, something far beyond the person they had once been. But there was no time to think about that now. They had to survive. With each strike, the monsters fell, but there were more of them. Too many. The group was outnumbered, and Alex could feel the weight of desperation creeping into their chest. They needed a plan, and fast. Then, without warning, one of the infected lunged at Alex from the side. The force of the impact sent them crashing into a nearby car, the breath knocked out of them. For a moment, everything went black. When Alex regained their senses, the infected creature was on top of them, its jagged teeth bared, its breath rancid. But something inside Alex snapped. They had been pushed too far. The fear, the desperation, the confusion. It all boiled over in a surge of raw power. With a roar, Alex threw the creature off them, tossing it aside like it was nothing. Their body felt different now, heavier, stronger, more dangerous. The power inside them surged, and they knew, deep down, that they were no longer the person they had been before the virus. They were something else, something that could fight back. Alex turned to face the rest of the group, who had been struggling to fend off the monsters as well. Daniel, his rifle nearly empty, was backed into a corner with two of the infected closing in. The others were fighting valiantly, but they were starting to lose ground. Alex couldn't let that happen. With a single determined step, Alex charged forward. Their body moved faster than they thought possible, every step fueled by the new power within them. In one fluid motion, they grabbed the first infected by the throat, lifting it off the ground with ease and throwing it into a nearby wall. It crashed into the stone, and for a moment, the street was still. The other infected hesitated, seemingly thrown off by Alex's sudden, unstoppable force. Alex didn't give them a chance to regroup. They charged again, moving faster than any of them had expected. In seconds, the group of monsters was down, their twisted bodies crumpled at Alex's feet. The survivors stared, wide-eyed. For a moment, there was silence. "Holy shit," one of the survivors whispered, eyes locked on Alex. You're like them, but not." Alex's breath was ragged, their body trembling from the exertion. They hadn't meant to do it, hadn't meant to become like this. But there was no denying it. The power that had been awakened inside them was growing stronger, and they didn't know if they could control it. Daniel approached, his rifle lowered, his face a mix of awe and concern. "You did it," he said quietly. "You saved us. But we need to talk." Alex nodded, their mind racing. They had saved the group, but at what cost? They were becoming something else, something that was part of the virus. They couldn't ignore it any longer. "We need to figure out how to control this," Alex said, their voice shaky. "Before it's too late." Daniel met their gaze. "We will. But right now, we've got to get out of here. There's no time. We've still got a long way to go to find the answers." The group gathered their things, still in shock from the battle. They knew they couldn't stay in the city for long. The infected would return, but they had a new sense of purpose now, and Alex knew, deep down, that they couldn't back down. They had to keep moving forward. As they set off once again, the weight of the virus, and the power it had awakened inside them, hung over Alex like a storm cloud. The questions remained, but one thing was clear: they couldn't stop now. The fight for survival wasn't over, and they would use the power inside them to make sure it didn't end with the monsters winning. There was still hope, but it was fading fast. The journey through the broken city seemed endless. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the very streets beneath their feet were dragging them down into the rubble. Alex could feel the power coursing through their veins, every step fueled by it, yet every moment was filled with doubt. They were becoming something else, something more dangerous, and they couldn't stop it. The power inside them was growing, and with it, the fear that they might lose control. The group moved in silence, the weight of their recent victory still lingering in the air. They hadn't spoken much since the battle with the infected. No one really knew how to react to what had happened. Alex had saved them, but they weren't sure if Alex was becoming the hero or the monster. The city was silent as they moved deeper into its heart. The streets, once filled with the hustle of life, were now nothing more than empty shells, a ghostly reminder of the world that had been. The buildings were hollowed out, their windows shattered, their doors torn off their hinges. It was as though the virus had wiped away everything, leaving only a barren wasteland behind. Daniel, always the leader, was the first to break the silence. He kept his voice low, his gaze scanning the horizon as he spoke. "We're close. We should make camp soon and rest up before we head into the heart of the city." Alex nodded, but their mind was elsewhere. They were torn between the desire to keep moving and the need to understand what was happening to them. The virus had changed them, yes, but was that change something they could control? Was it a gift or a curse? The group found an abandoned building, a structure that was still partially intact, with walls that offered some shelter from the harsh wind that howled through the city. They set up a small camp, the fire flickering weakly in the corner of the room. As they sat down to rest, the tension in the air was palpable. Alex could feel the eyes of the others on them, but they said nothing. What could they say? They had fought alongside the monsters and won, but at what cost? Daniel sat down next to Alex, his face somber. "You saved us," he said, his voice low. "But I can see it in your eyes. You're not the same person anymore." Alex looked at him, their heart heavy. "I don't know what I am anymore. I can feel the power, but it's not just strength. It's something else. I don't know how to control it." Daniel's gaze softened. "We need to find a way to stop this, to stop the virus. But I think the answers are in the heart of the city. The lab was only the beginning. If we can get to the central facility, we might find the source of the virus, the key to stopping it." Alex nodded, their mind racing. The central facility. That was the next step. But there was something else, a sense of urgency growing inside them. Every moment they spent in the city felt like it was bringing them closer to something dark, something that they couldn't fully understand. The night passed quietly, though Alex's mind was far from peaceful. The questions about their own transformation gnawed at them. They couldn't ignore the power that had awakened inside them, but they didn't want to become like the monsters they had fought. They didn't want to lose themselves to the virus, to become the very thing they were trying to stop. When morning came, the group packed up and prepared to move out once again. They had to keep going. Time was running out. The journey through the city was more dangerous than Alex had anticipated. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the city, the streets became more hostile. The infected were everywhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting for any sign of movement. The air was thick with a sense of unease, the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl. Alex's senses were sharper than ever before. They could hear the slightest rustle of movement in the distance, smell the faintest hint of decay in the air. It was as though the world had become a battlefield, and Alex was the only one who could see it all clearly. The group moved cautiously, avoiding the infected as best they could, but there were too many of them. The streets had become a maze of twisted alleyways and destroyed buildings, making it nearly impossible to find a clear path forward. At one point, they found themselves cornered in a narrow alley. The sound of footsteps echoed through the walls, and before they knew it, they were surrounded. The infected closed in, their eyes wild with hunger. Alex's heart pounded in their chest as they tightened their grip on their weapon. "We need a plan," Daniel hissed, his voice tense. "Alex, can you hold them off?" Alex nodded, their body already moving into position. The power inside them was building, and they could feel it surging through their limbs. They were no longer afraid of the infected. The fear that had once gripped them was gone. They were ready to fight, to use the power to their advantage. Without warning, Alex charged forward, moving faster than any of the infected could react. They struck with brutal efficiency, their blows landing with deadly force. It was like the virus had turned them into a weapon, and they were using it with precision. But the infected kept coming. More and more of them appeared, their twisted bodies seeming to multiply out of nowhere. Alex's mind raced as they fought, every instinct telling them to keep going, to push forward. They had to survive. They had to get to the central facility. Suddenly, Alex felt a sharp pain in their side. One of the infected had managed to land a blow, its claws sinking into their skin. The pain was intense, but Alex didn't flinch. They used the surge of power inside them to push through the pain, to keep fighting. The battle raged on, but finally, with a last, desperate push, the group managed to fight their way out of the alley. They were bloodied and bruised, but they were alive. The infected were gone, at least for now. As they regrouped, catching their breath, Alex felt a shift inside them. The power that had been building was no longer just a tool for survival. It was a part of them now. They could feel it in every cell of their body, in every breath they took. The virus had done something to them, something that they couldn't undo. But maybe, just maybe, it could be the key to stopping the virus for good. "We're close," Daniel said, his voice full of resolve. "We're almost there. The central facility is just ahead." Alex nodded, their heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The answers they sought were within reach, but they knew the final battle wouldn't be easy. The virus had changed the world, and it had changed them, but they were determined to see it through. They couldn't stop now, not when they were so close to the truth. As they moved forward, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The city was silent again, but this time, the silence felt different. It was a waiting silence. Something was coming, and Alex was ready for whatever it was.